for any obibiara washemi aha Ghanatube so memamo akwaba matana saying any na just nsem no bebre egu a etwem etiabusia for intem pass no mensem no mepese ubedi mechi na yawabotie nsem bia ekoso ewo Ghana na yaba.
So thank you, Honorable Ranking Member for the Committee on Energy. And he has set the tone by highlighting the very clandestine manner in which the government brought this bill to Parliament. Wasn't discussed at a business committee meeting, wasn't listed on the order paper, it wasn't even mentioned during the budget hearing. And then getting to the end of hearing for the day, an order paper addendum was brought in and it was quickly hurried through. Even efforts from the minority leader to request that we suspend and allow more consultation were refused. And that's why you realize that before its passage, our side had to wash our hands of what was being done to the people of Ghana and leave the chamber. Now, you are beginning to notice that, for example, the Chamber of Oil Distributors are openly calling it out that nobody was consulted. And this was smuggled in and infringed on the people of Ghana, and they've been pushing back, and now government says it will wait for a few days before it still goes ahead to implement it. You are also noticing that the driver unions are shocked and are calling government out for what it has done and are threatening even demonstrations in some instances. Now, we want to take a moment to highlight some things about the levy that, because the people of Ghana didn't get an opportunity to have a full discussion on it, have come up and we think we need to draw your attention to. First is the rate that is being charged. Ghanaians will bear witness that this levy is being charged at a rate of 8% per transaction. 8% per transaction. And this makes it one of the highest tax rates introduced in Ghana in a single instance. If you study the history of VAT and many of our other revenue handles, you will notice that at the first instance of introduction, sometimes it's 1%, 1.5% or 2%, and then maybe as the years go by, you may find some add-ons and then a consolidation. For this particular levy, at the first instance, the government is charging the people of Ghana 8%. And this is one of the highest rates at first instance in terms of taxation that is being introduced in the Republic. Again, even if this levy wasn't hypocritical, as has been mentioned by my brother, and had an honest justification, why would the government impose a levy with an 8% transaction rate on the people of Ghana? It's just simple wickedness. And to think that this 8% is on every gallon of fuel, actually cascading down to every liter of fuel, to pay for the inefficiencies in the energy sector, is simply a stab in the back of many people who believe the government at their word that they will not impose levies to pay for the inefficiencies in the energy sector. Now, for every 1 gallon of petrol product that you buy or diesel that you buy, this government is, because of this tax, going to take an additional 4 cedis and 50 pesos from you. That is 8%. We recall the NDC's claim that the then MPP government had done no work for Ghanaians when they are transferring their money, and therefore had no business in charging 1% levy on Momo transactions. So we ask you, what is the work that the NDC has done when you are buying your fuel, for which reason they are now charging 8% tax on it? Specifically, let's take a moment to compare this Doomsaw levy, the D levy, to the E levy that was recently repealed. It will be recalled that when the MPP introduced the E levy, our then colleagues in opposition bastardized it and told Ghanaians that it represented thievery. In fact, they used the expression pickpocketing. Unfortunately, a good number of Ghanaians bought into their propaganda. So let's compare the E levy to the Doomsaw levy, which has now been introduced by the NDC. First, the E levy was advertised in the budget. It was followed up with town hall meetings, and it onboarded extensive public consultations before the bill was finally passed in Parliament. This Doomsaw levy was smuggled through to avoid any form of public engagement, consultation, or scrutiny. It was neither advertised in the budget nor on the main order paper for the day. And that's why we say that this amounts to midnight robbery. The e-levy had an effective rate of 1% per transaction, yet it was described as pickpocketing. This Dumsor levy has the effective rate of 8% per transaction. And that's why we say that it is midnight robbery. The e-levy avoided transactions that were not in excess of 100 Ghana cedis, you will recall. And the argument that was canvassed at the time was that we had to create some room for the very poor to be excluded from it. Yet the e-levy was bastardized. The poor were exempted. This Dumsor levy has no minimum threshold. The poor are actually the most affected because, unlike the rich, for the poor, every single cedi counts a lot more. And that's why we say it's midnight robbery. The e-levy, number 4, was payable only by people who opted to do money transfers. This Dumsor levy is payable by all Ghanaians, unless you decide to work every day. Because even if you're a farmer and you are buying fuel for your tractors to work on your farm, you will pay this Dumsor levy that this government has just imposed. It's payable by everybody. Number 5, while the e-levy had a limited cascading effect, this Dumsor levy has a total 100% cascading effect because it affects transportation. And consequently, any item that is transported, food, clothes, whatever, once you are transporting it, there's a cascading effect that eventually, when we go full circle, will be paid by the everyday Ghanaian. Number 6, the e-levy was designed to yield approximately 2 billion Ghana cedis from persons who elected to do transfers or transactions. Now, colleagues, you are here in Parliament. You will recall the day that the e-levy was repealed. Our good friend, the majority leader, was on his feet, shouting his voice hoarse that the government has put 2 billion cedis back into the pockets of Ghanaians. I'm sure you recall. This Dumsor levy is taking from everybody over 5.7 billion cedis for this fiscal years. So if repealing the e-levy puts 2 billion back into the pockets of Ghanaians, what does introducing the Dumsor levy that takes away 5.7 billion do? In his own words, this government is taking 5.7 billion Ghana cedis from the pocket of Ghanaians. And we think it is very dishonest because if you claim that you are giving Ghanaians 2 billion back, which was so untoward, it was evil by the previous administration, how do you give back 2 billion and take 5.7 billion from the people? It's only the NDC government that does that, justifies it, and expects everybody to say that that is some smart economic approach. We, however, have some alternative suggestions to make to the government, and I'd like to highlight a few of them. The minority believes strongly that if this government is minded to pay off the energy sector debt, because you recall that part of their justification is that they want to pay off the energy sector debt. In fact, the president said he will pay it off by December 2026. And we have just done the maths for you, that if you look at what is going to accrue in the 2 years, it cannot pay off the energy sector debt. But let us assume that they are being honest with that they want to pay off the energy sector debt. We think that what the government should do is to conclude the renegotiations of the of the power purchase agreements which were started by the previous administration, and to pass on 2 things, the fuel and capacity charges into the PPAs. Government should include these in the tariff calculations to eliminate the need for off-book debts that are caused by the take or pay clauses in the energy sector contracts that were signed between 2013 and 2016. And you will recall that that is one of the major challenges that has created the stock of energy sector debt. The capacity charges and the take or pay charges, which could not be included in the tariffs. And so every now and then a bill is sent to the finance ministry to pay, and that bill is accumulating. If the government is really intended to pay, one of the things it should do is to complete the renegotiation, move the fuel purchases and the excess capacity charges into the PPAs, so that when people consume a certain realistic amount, then they will pay. Number 2, government should quicken the efforts to bring efficiency into the operations of GRIDCO and ECG to reduce transmission, distribution, and other technical losses. You have followed the arguments that part of the problem is the losses occasioned during transmission and distribution and collection. If government really means well, that is one of the areas to focus attention and front load. Number 3, we're asking government to pursue the strategy that we proposed in 2024 to go heavily into renewable energy, as advertised, for example, in our manifesto, to reduce the need for fuel importation and its consequent negative impacts on the economy. And you will recall that prior to 2024, in the elections, we signaled that if the NPP was in power today, we'll focus heavily on augmenting with solar power, so that this whole thing of buying HFO and fuel for the power plants will be reduced. And you don't have to then come and impose these levies on Ghanaians at 8% to pay for the inefficiencies in the sector, contrary to the promise that you made. In closing, colleagues, it's already clear that the government intends to go ahead with the implementation of this draconian levy, and they will not listen to anybody's plea, anybody's reasoning, or anybody's alternative ideas. We as a minority group representing over 10 million Ghanaians, and sometimes people say, oh, they are just 88. In our 88 constituencies, you will find over 10 million Ghanaians. We want to advertise that we'll be embarking on the following. Number 1, we'll continuously engage the people of Ghana, civil society groups, driver unions, and the media to showcase the true impact of this draconian and negative levy that the government is imposing on us. Number 2, we'll continue to stand with the groups of honest Ghanaians, the driver unions, the Chamber of Oil marketers, who are opposing the levy or asking government to pull back and to engage better, and not to go by this midnight introduction into parliament and using their numbers to push it through. We know the government has a lot of goodwill, but this is not the way to do things. Number 3, we'll continue to stand in solidarity with the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies in their position that this downstream sector is already heavily overtaxed. And now if you add this new levy, effectively about 26% of what you are paying at the pump is all taxes. And we'll continue with our advocacy to government to withdraw this levy and adopt less painful and more pragmatic options, some of which we have suggested in this afternoon's press briefing. We are grateful to you for your attendance, and we look forward to further engagements on this subject. We'll take your questions.
You are here for an for me. I must pass and we mention your cotier in summer. A cost on my gun one day, and I will can't find some of our comments. No, have a comment section. Now making Kayamo Ghanatube Sunni or Duffo Snowy and Sunni. I was for Nkrumah.